While the use of forced labor allegations against fast fashion supplier Shein have gone to parliamentarians in the UK, there are other issues in the fashion supply chain. Can you talk a little bit about how these issues arise within Taiwan's fashion supply chain?
This problem with Shine has been, going on for quite a while. But yeah, it does highlight, the problems that also exist in Taiwan, which has a pretty extensive supply chain within the apparel industry. Recently, there were about 20 some odd global brands. So brands such as, Gap and North Face, Patagonia, I mean, that came to Taiwan to pressure the Taiwan government to do something about forced labor within Taiwan company supply chains in the apparel industry. And this had specifically to do with the treatment of migrant workers, in particular, asking migrant workers to bear the burden of paying brokerage fees for local brokers that were bringing them to Taiwan. And in general, the company said, the best practice is for the companies to pay the brokerage fee, not to put the burden on workers.
Can you address and explain to the audience some of these issues and abuses that we see within the supply chain?
Yeah, what we see is, so examples, problems with, brokerage agent or labor agencies abusing their power. These workers, when they go to another country, they tend to work in a very confined environment. They may not speak the language. They don't have as much recourse to, for example, the local labor unions. Other kinds of problems incur with, like, especially with female migrant workers or uh, female workers themselves who, encounter problems of sexual harassment, sexual abuse in the workplace. And these are things that when I talk about migrant workers, I'm not just talking about those who come from other countries, but also those who come maybe from other parts of that country, from the countryside, to come work in the cities. Also, problems with sanitation, the kind of sanitary environment, sanitary facilities provided to workers as well is another issue, another big complaint that's made by workers in general.
From a consumer and a public policy perspective, what can be done to put an end to these abuses within the fashion industry?
Yeah, I think consumers can just be aware of the conditions under which these clothes, the fat, whether it's fast fashion or other types of apparel, are produced. I mean, and to be informed about these kinds of problems, and to, maybe make also consumer choices about the kinds of companies that do a better job in terms of mitigating these kinds of problems, as opposed to other companies that have a poor reputation or poor record of that. Policy wise, the EU they have a directive on forced labor and also a directive on the mandatory human rights due diligence, requiring large companies to do that kind of due diligence in their supply chains.